Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Raving Raconteur, and I'm here with a discussion, a couple of readings from May Swenson's first published collection of poetry, Another Animal from 1954. I really enjoyed it. I like May Swenson's poetry a lot. I'd found it in different anthologies just over the past probably 10 years, and I finally was able to find a copy of like her collected poems and just dug in almost right away. So I read it over the last week, and Swenson is, in my mind, in that upper echelon of top poets from the United States in the second half of the 20th century. People like Elizabeth Bishop, John Berryman, Maya Angelou. I really put May Swenson's work into that same, top category of just poetry I love to read, love to reread. She's probably most famous now for a tendency to, and she didn't do this all the time, but she would periodically write poems where she would vary the line structure or the shape of the lines and words on the page and use white space to create different effects. And I think that's probably what most people who come across her work have heard about. I don't think that's not what I appreciate about her poetry. It's there, it exists, but it's not what I appreciate. So very quickly, Another Animal is published in 1954. She's 40 or 41 at that time, May Swenson is, and I believe was living in New York at that point, but was born and raised in rural Utah. She grew up speaking Swedish until she was in grade school, I believe it was. Her parents, she was raised as a Mormon and always remained a member of the Mormon Church, though was not like an active member once she became an adult. And so from that, rural southwestern United States upbringing, she moves to New York and becomes politically active, works in some different jobs, but primarily starts writing poetry. She famously, in the family's sort of like a version of almost like a who's who, like the family tree type thing, she submitted, instead of, she had no children, she submitted the names of all of her poems that had been published at one point. So let's jump in and we'll see. Another Animal has this cool sensibility of very natural, like a real sense of the natural world and wonder. And so I'm going to read a poem that kind of shows that. This is called An Unknown Island. No way to turn but in, nowhere to go but back. The earth is round and man has come full circle. Faster he flies, farther flings himself, sooner arriving at starting point, closer comes to beginning. From fetal snail blind in a fold of the womb, to the discus thrower uncoiling in the light of morning, his thighs and biceps powered juice, from earth-knuckling ape in mountain socket, to the aviator in unplowed air, scaling virgin Alps of cloud. A flicker of evolution's lens, a squeeze of biology's trigger. The frontiers are internal now. Brain like the meat of a nut, but also like twin continents, is all the space. Heart like a clock, but also like a pulsing universe, is all the time we have. And this is enough, and more than enough. There have been no other gods before me. The earth our bulb from which we spring, our green body a vaster thing, an unknown island to be sought, volute discovery, the oceanic span of thought, the soul's geography. I rarely find a poem that delves into science and the true scientific side of nature as well, and with such technical precision as that poem. And it's astonishing the way she thinks through. But then you can also see examples, and we'll see how clearly this comes through, but you can see examples of how the lines create an effect in this next poem. This is called Satanic Form. Numerals, fork marks of Satan, triangles, circles, squares, hieroglyphs of death, things invented, abortion smelling of the forge, licked to gruesome smoothness by the lathe, things metallic or glass, frozen, twisted, flattened, stretched to agonized bubbles, bricks, beams, receptacles, vehicles, forged through fire, hatched to unwilling form. Oh, blasphemies. Time caught in a metal box, incongruous the rigid, clucking tongue, the needled hands, the 12-eyed face, against the open window past which drops the night, like a dark lake on end or flowing hair. Night, unanimous over all the city. The knuckled fist of the heart opening and closing, flower and stone not cursed with symmetry, cloud and shadow not doomed to shape and fixity, the intricate body of man without rivet or nail, or the terrible skirl of the screw. Oh, these are blessed. Satanic form geometry of death, the lariat around the neck of space, the particles of chaos in the clock, the bottle of the yellow liquor light that circumvents the sifting down of night. O love, the juice in the green stem growing, you cannot synthesize. It corrodes in phials and beakers, evaporates in the hot breath of industry, escapes to the air and the dew, returns to the root of the unborn flower. O Satan, cheated of your power. And so she again combines like natural images and imagery from nature in a way that I think is kind of common among some of those southwestern United States poets, where they just see the vista, or you see emptiness and then there's the one plant there, so you fixate on it, with this sense of science and industry and innovation in just a really interesting way. And so that's primarily what the poems in Another Animal consist of. But this is great because this has her, collected poems. It has selected unpublished or uncollected poems. And those provide a different insight into who May Swenson is. So we get this early work. This is 20 years before she published Another Animal. It is a stern thing, this bringing into being, this taking of a clod that is cold, and veining it with sprouts of fire, this wresting of a star from chaos, and chiseling it upon the lathe of exactness, this making of an indolent thing, urgent, this begetting of eagerness. It is a hard and a fierce thing. Did you find it so, God? Which is just, it's like if you took all of Job and then tried to compact it into a 10-line poem and blast it out. Also, again, the use of lathe, like you get this sense of someone who has seen and experienced a rural lifestyle. So there's this sense of May Swenson as this very natural poet. But the unpublished May Swenson is interesting. So she again, was raised Mormon and always considered herself a Mormon, despite not really continuing to attend church once she had reached adulthood. And part of that tension comes, I think you'll be able to tell, from this next poem that I'll read. And this is an unpublished poem. Lie still and let me love you, first with my eyes that feast upon you, as on deep skies, to count the constellations, below your breast Andromeda, Orion, and the rest. Lie still and let me love you, now with my hands that dream over your body, as in wondrous lands skiers ascend sun-mantled peaks and sweep to snow-smooth hollows, where silence speaks. Lie still and let me love you, with my mouth pressed among strange flowers, elixirs of the south, to drink their dewy musk, or like rich grapes, I nuzzle with my lips, until their wine escapes. Lie still and let me love you, with all my weight, urgent upon you, deep-keeled elate. My body greets you a leaping boat, challenging your tide, to be the stronger, and now afloat. Lie still no longer. Demand I love you, the more, will passion's breakers bear us to their shore. And that poem is titled To a Dark Girl. And so that gives us that window into May Swenson, was a lesbian, and knew that at a young age, and had a partner. I think that was what she like the term she used. And so that tension existed within her poetry, but early on, of course, that's not what she published. So that gives you kind of a feel for what I regard as sort of what May Swenson's known for, like in terms of what I value as her poetry, but also what she was capable of, like the deep love poetry, the very earthy, sensual poetry she was also writing even when she wasn't publishing it. And so, of course, that earthy side, I would put it right up there with some of the strongest poetry by D.H. Lawrence. Another poet who's probably not very well known, like even less well known than May Swenson, is Angelina Veld Grimke, not Grimke Veld, but Veld Grimke, who was a poet within the Harlem Renaissance, and who again has poetry that seems to be fairly, clearly about being in love with women, and that was not really published or was just privately shared. And then with Swenson had very, very, very long friendship and like professional back and forth, like a sort of like almost a fencing partner in a very constructive way with Elizabeth Bishop, who Library of America has a great edition from her. With that sense of sort of naturalism, I think, especially within the Western United States, Theodore Roethke is a great poet that connects to that side of Swenson's work. She's often compared, bizarrely, in my opinion, to Walt Whitman. I think the big difference is this. They're both very interested in nature and that aspect of writing, But Whitman tends to expand. His lines get longer and longer. He takes poetic form and stretches it as far as he can. Swenson, in my mind, does the opposite, often around the same themes. She takes poetry and language and tries to constrict it and compress it as much as possible. Her lines get shorter and shorter. So that's just my take, personally. And then again, if you really are into those weird, like, white space and, you know, making the poems into shapes, George Herbert's a great person to run to for that. And he also does some wonderful, like, religious poems, spiritual poems. So that's May Swenson, an introduction, Another Animal. So thanks, everyone. I'll be back Saturday with Augustus Along Part 1. Bye.